In 1987, a 31-year-old Australian actor walked onto a police precinct set in Los Angeles wearing a black plastic watch on his wrist. The watch was a Tag Heuer Formula 1, reference 383.513, 35 millimeters across, quartz movement, a case so small by today's standards it barely cleared the lug width of what serious collectors wear in 2024. It cost somewhere between $150 and $200 at retail. The character wearing it was Martin Riggs, a former Special Forces operator turned suicidal homicide detective who slept on the floor of a trailer with a German Shepherd and kept a hollow point round in his nightstand for when the darkness got too thick to outrun. The actor wearing it was Mel Gibson. The Lethal Weapon franchise ran 4 films over 11 years, generated over $950 million at the global box office, and launched Gibson into the stratosphere of Hollywood bankability. He wore the same category of watch through all 4 films. A plastic Tag Heuer, not a Rolex, not an Omega, not a Breitling. A plastic Tag Heuer that a working cop could have bought on a detective's salary. We are going to go through every significant watch Mel Gibson has ever worn on screen and explain exactly what each one is, what it costs, what it says about the character wearing it, and why a man who directed The Passion of the Christ for a reported production budget of $30 million, self-funded, and watched it gross $612 million at the global box office, making him personally one of the most profitable filmmakers in Hollywood history, still gravitates toward watches that cost less than a tank of premium gasoline in a modern SUV. Mel Colmcille Gerard Gibson was born in Peekskill, New York in 1956, the 6th of 11 children of Hutton Gibson, a railroad brakeman and quiz show contestant who moved the family to Australia in 1968 to prevent his sons from being drafted into the Vietnam War. Gibson grew up in Sydney, trained at the National Institute of Dramatic Art on a scholarship, and became a movie star at 23 when Mad Max opened in 1979. He has never stopped working since. His net worth is estimated at between $425 million and $470 million, depending on the source and the year. He earned a reported $25 million per picture at the height of his box office dominance in the 1990s. He personally financed The Passion of the Christ and personally received the profits when it became one of the highest-grossing independent films ever released. He owns real estate across multiple continents. He has 9 children. He is, by any measurable standard, a man whose financial resources would support any watch purchase on Earth without requiring consideration of the price. The watches he has consistently chosen across 45 years of public life tell a different story from the one his net worth implies. The Tag Heuer Formula 1 reference 383.513 is the most important watch in the Gibson catalog, and the one that defines the template for everything that follows it. The Formula 1 collection was launched by Tag Heuer in 1986. Inspired by the Formula 1 racing partnership the brand held with McLaren at a period when Ayrton Senna and Alain Prost were at the peak of their competitive rivalry, and the global Formula 1 audience was at its broadest in history. The design language of the Formula 1 was deliberate mass appeal, bold, plastic-heavy, affordable, capable of surviving the conditions that working people actually encounter in the course of their day. The case was 35 millimeters, smaller than virtually every sports watch sold today, with a black dial, a plastic bezel, and a rubber strap in the same black. The movement was quartz, accurate, and maintenance-free, powered by a battery that could be replaced at any watch shop for a few dollars. The retail price sat comfortably within the budget of any professional in any field. Martin Riggs wore it through Lethal Weapon 1, 2, 3, and 4, which spanned from 1987 to 1998. The watch did not change as the character aged and the films accumulated box office history. Riggs remained a man who wore what a cop actually wore, not what the movies said a hero should wear. That consistency is its own statement. Gibson was earning millions per picture by the time the 4th film wrapped. Riggs was still wearing plastic Tag Heuer. The Rolex GMT Master in the Pepsi configuration is the second significant watch in the Gibson catalog, and the one that reveals the most about what happens when a character's circumstances expand beyond what a working detective earns. In Air America, released in 1990, Gibson plays Billy Covington, a reckless cargo pilot operating for the CIA's covert airline during the Vietnam War in Laos, a man with neither moral anchor nor financial restraint. careening through a morally compromised operation with the energy of someone who has decided that the rules of civilized society do not apply to him. The watch on Covington's wrist is a Rolex GMT Master, the Pepsi bezel version in steel, the red and blue aluminum bezel that has become one of the most recognizable watch configurations in the history of the brand. The choice is character logic applied precisely. A CIA pilot operating in a gray market war zone, earning money outside normal channels, living outside normal accountability, wearing a watch associated with the golden age of international aviation. The GMT was designed by Rolex in 1954 for Pan Am's long-haul pilots to track 2 time zones simultaneously on transoceanic routes. Its presence on Covington's wrist in a covert airline operating in a country the United States was not officially in place as the character in a tradition of aviation that the mission itself is a perversion of. The watch makes him both a real pilot and a reminder of everything legitimate aviation is not. The Breitling Super Avenger is the 3rd major watch in the Gibson filmography, and the one that marks his transition from protagonist to antagonist in the larger action franchise ecosystem. In Expendables 3, released in 2014, Gibson plays Conrad Stonebanks, the former founder of the Expendables team, who has become its primary enemy, a man of considerable resources and ruthless efficiency who has spent the intervening years making himself a target the entire crew must neutralize. The watch on Stonebanks' wrist is a first-generation Breitling Super Avenger, a 48mm aviation chronograph in stainless steel that is one of the most physically imposing watches in the Breitling catalog. The Super Avenger is not a subtle watch. Its case diameter exceeds what most people would consider wearable by any conventional measure of proportion. Its dial is packed with the functional information of a professional aviation instrument. A tachometer, a chronograph layout, a slide rule bezel for flight calculations, subsidiary dials for hours and minutes of elapsed time. It weighs significantly on the wrist. It announces itself the moment it enters a room. The choice for Stonebanks is precisely calibrated, a man who was once part of a team of operators, but has graduated into a different category of threat, wears a watch that signals the transition. The Super Avenger retailed for approximately $4,000 to $5,000 in its original configuration, a meaningful step up from the plastic Tag Heuer that Riggs wore, reflecting the distance between a suicidal detective who has nothing and an arms dealer who controls everything. The Tag Heuer Formula One context deserves elaboration beyond its appearance in Lethal Weapon, because Gibson wore Tag Heuer in his personal life as well as through his most famous character. In Tequila Sunrise, released in 1988 in the same year the first Lethal Weapon sequel appeared, Gibson plays Dale McCusick, a retired drug dealer trying to leave the business while the business refuses to release him. The watch on his wrist in scenes across the film is again a Tag Heuer Formula One, this time in a lighter colorway that catches differently against a California coastal setting that is a long way from the police precinct. The Formula One traveling across 2 completely different characters, one a cop on the edge of breakdown and the other a dealer trying to construct a legitimate life, suggests something beyond wardrobe department coincidence. It suggests a performer who understood what a watch communicates and chose the same watch for characters in different circumstances because the watch itself said something true about both of them. The Tag Heuer Formula One is the watch of a person who is in the middle of their life, who has things to do, who does not have the luxury of wearing something that exists primarily to communicate how much they paid for it. The Longines appears in the Gibson catalog in a different capacity, from the Action Watch franchise, connected to his work as a director rather than as a performer. Gibson has been photographed at industry events and public appearances over the years wearing a Longines, the Swiss brand from Saint-Imier, that has been producing watches since 1832, and that occupies a position in the market that is simultaneously prestigious and resolutely unpretentious. Longines does not have the secondary market premium of Rolex. It does not have the cultural cachet of Patek Philippe. It has a documented history of precision timekeeping that predates most of the aspirational brands, charging 3 times its retail price, and it charges what its manufacturing actually costs rather than what its marketing aspiration would support. A Longines Master Collection at $1,500 to $2,000 is the choice of someone who has done the research and decided that the watch should represent the craft inside it rather than the story around it. The same logic that produced The Passion of the Christ on a $30 million self-finance budget, bypassing the studio system entirely because the studio system would not make the film he wanted to make, applies to selecting a watch that does the job without requiring the infrastructure of a luxury brand's marketing department to explain why it is worth owning. The Watch and Signs, the 2002 M. Night Shyamalan film in which Gibson plays a former Episcopal priest who has lost his faith following his wife's death in a road accident, has been the subject of collector forum discussion for years without definitive resolution. The watch is rectangular, with a silver case, what appear to be two pushers alongside the crown, and a clean white dial on a leather or nylon strap. The community on Watch You Seek spent considerable energy trying to identify it without landing on a confirmed answer. What the discussion established is that it is not an obvious luxury piece, not a Rolex or an Omega or any of the brands whose silhouette is immediately recognizable to someone who has spent time in the category. It is an anomaly in the watchmaking landscape, a square-cased piece with complication pushers that do not conform to the expected vocabulary of the brands most people know. The character wearing it is a man who has withdrawn from the world following a crisis of faith, who is living in rural Pennsylvania farming corn and raising 2 children alone, who has stripped most of the trappings of his former professional life away. A watch that resists easy identification on a wrist belonging to a character who has made himself deliberately difficult to categorize is exactly the right object. The wardrobe department, or Gibson himself, made a choice that served the character's opacity. The Rolex Pepsi GMT Master returns as a real-life point of reference in the Air America context because its selection for that film was clearly informed by the watch's history rather than its current secondary market premium. In 1990, the Pepsi GMT there was a legitimate professional pilot's tool watch with a specific historical connection to the airline industry. It was not yet the secondary market phenomenon it would become 30 years later, trading at multiples of retail and requiring dealer relationships to acquire. It was a watch that a pilot who had money would wear. The choice for Covington's character in 1990 is historically grounded in what the watch actually was at that moment, not what it would later become in the collector community's imagination. Gibson, or the wardrobe department, made a research decision, not a prestige decision, which is consistent with a general pattern of using watch choices to serve the character's reality rather than the audience's expectation of what a movie star's character should wear. The Breitling Avenger reference E73360 appears in a different configuration from the Super Avenger in The Expendables, worn in a separate production context and in a slightly smaller 42mm case than the oversized version Gibson wore as Stonebanks. The Avenger family from Breitling is organized around professional aviation requirements, with movements certified by the COSC chronometer standard, case constructions rated to 100 meters of water resistance, and dial layouts designed for high-stress reading under time pressure. The E73360 specifically uses a quartz movement which positions it as a professional instrument prioritizing accuracy over mechanical tradition, a choice that makes sense for a character or production context requiring reliable, maintenance-free performance. Its retail price in the range of $2,000 to $3,000 places it firmly in the professional watch category without crossing into the territory where the price premium is primarily paying for brand mythology rather than function. The Breitling Super Avenger as Conrad Stonebanks deserves a separate note on what it communicates about the specific moment in Gibson's career when Expendables 3 appeared. By 2014, Gibson had been through a documented public collapse in 2006, following a drunk driving arrest and an anti-Semitic tirade to arresting officers, a 2010 recording of abusive phone calls to his former partner, and a period of sustained public rejection that effectively ended his status as a bankable Hollywood leading man for the better part of a decade. Expendables 3 represented a specific kind of return, not as the hero, but as the villain, not as the protagonist the audience is meant to identify with, but as the antagonist whose menace the audience is supposed to register and respect. Stonebanks is a man who was once on the right side and chose differently. The Super Avenger on his wrist is the watch of a man who has resources, who has power, and who is not trying to fit back into any category that previously contained him. Whether the watch was Gibson's personal contribution to the character or a wardrobe decision is not documented. The result is coherent either way. Here is what the entire pattern, read across 45 years of documented watch choices in film and in public life, actually says about Mel Gibson. He is a man with $400 million in net worth who has never been photographed wearing a watch that costs more than $5,000 in his personal life. His on-screen watch choices are consistently driven by character logic rather than brand prestige: the plastic Tag Heuer that belongs on a suicidal detective's wrist, the Pepsi GMT that belongs on a rogue CIA pilot's wrist, the Super Avenger that belongs on an arms dealer's wrist. Each choice is a research decision rather than an aspirational one, the same instinct that produced Braveheart by reconstructing medieval Scotland with practical effects and historical advisors rather than digital spectacle, that produced The Passion of the Christ by shooting it entirely in Aramaic and Latin with no subtitles because the story it was telling did not require translation to be understood. The man who made those films is the man who wears a Longinus to industry events and a Tag Heuer to everything else. He is not shopping for what the watch communicates about his net worth. He is shopping for what the watch actually does. In Hollywood, where the watch on the wrist is almost universally used as a compressed statement about what category of person you are and how much you have accumulated, that is its own kind of radicalism. He has $400 million and he still just needs to know what time it is.